All right, Sinen, why don't you tell us how you were encouraged in prep and preaching of the passage?
Yeah, I think the is this so how I was encouraged? Are you asking skill set or
No, how are you impacted?
oh right. So the
Sorry, I know it's your first time.
Right.
on the fire.
It's like I get confused. So just encouraged by the way the passage made me look at Jesus as the one greater. I was just admiring what we have in Christ in my preparation. So that was a challenge and a comfort.
Baxter.
Yeah, likewise. I was encouraged how we saw it was good for the people to have David as their king at this point. And how greater is it for us then to have Christ as our reigning king. And I specifically was encouraged by the idea of being able to assemble around our king and that reminder in your first point. So thank you for your word.
Stephen.
I was also just encouraged just by the idea of having that greater king as our focus. So no matter what our position is, are we pointing people to the greater king rather than to ourselves?
I appreciated what you said about success, that it comes from God, that it's defined by God.
Yeah, for me it was the elevation greater than David, but specifically your move to he assembles greater, right? Like when you took your 4 points and it was just like, wow, like he's ratcheted up at every level of what this text is showing. He's attacking sin, death, and the devil. I was moved to admiration like you were.
I also appreciated what you said about success comes from God and it's defined by God.
Yeah. So I was encouraged by this idea that like things can get better, not just like for David or even like with Jesus, but like what we're waiting for is going to be even better than this.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated and was impacted by your kind of turn of phrase on David about him having that thing to sin, that sickness that kind of shows up. Just because, all throughout the text, he's painted as this huge king and this glorious king, but right, and you kind of turn over, but it's God working through it, and that was just impactful. I think it was a really well done turn of phrase and turn of position too, so it really, it impacted me. I like it.
All right. Sin, where do you need to improve from this sermon?
How long you got?
2 hours.
41 minutes.
So yeah, the areas I'm trying to work on hard were, so first the feedback I received the other time I preached, so try to shorten my homiletical points, shorten my argument. But this time around I was trying to work on learning from that feedback and also just being, so the teach, please, move aspect, which I think needs, it just, I left time to work on it, but as I was working on it, I was like, yeah, you've got a long way to go. So it doesn't help to listen to Ramel last night, so anyway.
Well, I did appreciate the short homiletical points. There were, I don't know how to say this, I felt like there were moments where I was trying to make the connection in my own head between your homiletical points and your argument.
Yep.
And it wasn't clearly stated for us. It's like we had to, how does a great assembly point to the fact that it is good for us to have a greater king? Like I was trying to make that jump in my head. So I think clarity in connecting those homiletical points to the argument is one spot to improve.
Stephen?
I think I would have benefited maybe if we had more repetition and summation all through it, because I know you had a lot there. So just kind of summarizing.
Of the argument.
Yeah,
Yep.
and your points as you move. Just kind of refresh us. Yeah.
So, your third point was like so short. I was like
Yeah.
writing something down, and then I look up, and then it's like, oh
Done.
shoot, we're on the fourth point. I gotta start writing something else. So yeah, that just made me wonder. Like, I mean, I know that idea came up later,
Yeah.
but I was like, was that point necessary? Like,
Like
Yeah.
90 seconds.
yeah. So
It was me kind of, that's what you do when you don't know how to apply it. That's the truth.
yeah.
So kind of like, oh man, trust what I've got. That's a good point.
I thought you landed the plane like 3 or 4 times
Sure.
at the end. Like I kept feeling like, oh man, that's great. Oh, is that his last line? Oh nope, I guess we're not coming down quite yet. So, like you hit a lot of highs. But yeah, it was like,
Yeah, black preachers too.
yeah.
It's not good for my preaching.
I definitely caught your homiletical outline at the beginning, and I wrote it down.
Yeah.
But I think you just kind of ran
Yeah.
through it really quickly after stating your argument that could have been easily missed.
So, in your first point, you were talking about when they come to David for confession and coronation, right? They're like, you know, this is a greater king. And I was like, a greater king than who?
Yeah.
There was
Set
no
that up.
clue as to like who he was a greater king than in that point. It came up later, but when it
Yeah.
wasn't at all clear at that,
That was the
point.
place to put that.
You would have thought
there.
so.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my only point I had Baxter took, so I'll just reiterate it. Sorry to double down.
Yep,
But yeah,
that's
the
fine.
homiletics, and that's the weird thing is I could follow you where you were going and I
Yeah.
understood how
Yeah.
everything came back to your argument, but the titles
Sure.
didn't help. Like looking back at them, I don't remember how they connect to that, then connecting, if that makes
Alright.
sense.
I didn't
So
see
like,
any.
you did well, but the points maybe just worded differently or more supportive of the argument or pointing to or something like that, yeah.
I very much appreciated many aspects of your gospel connection, but a couple pieces of feedback would be it seemed very long. It took up a good portion of this sermon, and I did feel I was in it for a while and then I fell out of it, to Kevin's point, because there was a moment where you actually ran back through your homiletical outline and it sounded like you were summing up, and then you went back into Revelation.
Yeah.
So it felt like we were out of the text for a while.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it really circled and underlined something specific about this text. I mean, yeah, he's greater, but yeah, maybe a more tightly packed
Tightly
gospel
packed,
connection.
yeah.
Even all of that just quicker and shorter would have been more impactful.
Stephen,
That's it for me.
on then.
Yeah, so this is kind of just like going from good to great, but because I thought you really delivered this sermon well. But I think if you worked on just like having some more intentional pauses at times throughout, I think it would just really help punch stuff. So like one part I noticed was you know, Jesus on the Good Friday died,
Yeah.
and like in your
Yeah.
delivery he didn't stay dead very long because you immediately were like Sunday morning he got up, you know. Like I think if you just would have let that sit,
Yeah.
you know, for a couple more seconds, it
Yeah,
just would
that's-
have been punchier.
That's
There were
right.
several.
I didn't practice after, so I was kind of living on the kind of working on what I was trying to work on.
Yeah.
But I didn't leave time to, okay, how do I communicate this?
Yeah.
As in speak, yeah. That's a
Yeah,
good point.
and don't get me wrong, like you delivered it really well.
No,
This is just
I
you,
felt
it would be even
I
better.
think you're right. I
um,
felt that
yeah.
when I was
Yeah.
speaking. So
Cool.
I was like, oh, I just missed it.
Yeah.
Not that I do any changing, but yeah, I take your point 100%.
in your second point, you started talking about some application elements that like God is greater, right, than like things we're attacking, and then like greater than the sin or detractors or like members, but like I didn't know like in what way. Like does that automatically mean like we're gonna beat every sin, or that these members are gonna leave us alone, or
That was my drive-by.
yeah, so that's kind of what like I was like, oh, like all right, how do we attack these things? And you just didn't.
Yeah, I'm more like what you're saying. I like to get down to the nitty-gritty and show you how it happens.
Yeah.
How you shouldn't do it.
Or even
That
to
was
like
a-
what extent we
a
should
new
expect.
tool I was
it.
trying to employ.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's good.
All mine have been taken.
So I thought you had an interesting illustration with the Lion King. All right. And you said, like, this kind of history is like David's, and you did a funny job with recounting the Lion King, but you assumed that we all knew how those events related to the life of David. You didn't actually do that part of it.
Saying enough.
You didn't say like Simba,
Like,
so
yeah.
David or whatever. It was just like, oh, so I'm
It's
First of
just
all,
one
I'm-
line.
right. So that as far as like I understand the Lion King pretty well, but I don't know how you think that those events necessarily match up with
Right.
David's life.
Oh, that's good.
Was he faithful to the Lion King?
Right. Yeah. Definitely canon with the Lion King.
I don't have anything else.
All right. And Sinen, what were you really happy with in your work today?
Oh, so that's why I got confused. So I mentioned that earlier. So trying to work on the teach please, the particular move aspect of my delivery. Again, it was kind of like, yeah, but also, as I realized, like, right, there's a long way to go to, because I had Broadus in mind, just next to me, so I was trying to work through how he was doing it, and employ a bit of the kind of use of questions, and a bit of drive-bys, you know, that kind of thing. So I was working really hard on moving people to my own. Yeah.
And you thought you did that well?
Yeah, better than
Before.
than
Okay.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I particularly enjoyed towards the end your handling of the history of Israel and the monarch, and just employing some historical trajectory, which we've been talking about in here, and how to employ that in preaching, and the initial upward slope of that even with Solomon, but how you kind of went into how it drops off and how that trajectory continues, and I just thought you employed that very well and in a clear way. So I thought that was great.
I liked how you took us through the text. I feel like he's in the text.
I appreciated a couple times you really specifically were like, we could speculate on this, but let's see what the text says. And I thought that was helpful, not only to keep us stuck to the text, but also if you're doing that sort of thing at home at your church, you're teaching your people to read their Bibles better. So I thought that was just a really good move to have in your sermon. A good little just teaching tool.
I know Marge kind of dinged you on it, but I actually liked that you weren't like laborious about introducing your 4 points, because you were so clear when you came back to them. I was like, all right, you like told me where you're going, and then each one was just clear enough that I wasn't surprised. Maybe other people like in a normal congregation would like not follow it, but I actually liked that. It just meant that we were into your first point before 3 minutes. So I liked that actually.
I loved the way you used your homiletical outline and your gospel connection.
Yeah.
I thought that was really tricky.
So I like the, just because you talked about trying to do it, so some of those runs were super effective. So like that one near the end, I wonder if right? That thing really moved. And then ending with the whole thing, he's better because he came to give and not take. So that was successful.
Yeah, I really liked your application to the church leaders. I thought it was all very applicable, but also direct, confrontational, and not in a like scary or offensive way, but it's like you got to have your things right. And your first point is like, is your assembly gathering to you or to God? Right, and then even your end, right, is your ministry about God, kind of even framing your message with those two as being most important. I really liked all the application. I thought it was really powerful and potent, as well as supporting your points. So it was all around good.
One of the most enjoyable parts of the sermon for me, one of the most engaging parts, which I was not expecting this, was verses 6 through 8, and I didn't get it all down because I was just enjoying listening to it. But I thought whatever you did there was very engaging. You were using those two wise sayings, and you were even referring to yourself, I'm not a wise person, and you employing those kind of sayings to kind of show these couple points that you were trying to make. I just thought, yeah, that was like very enjoyable section and very engaging, and you used it to get to what you were trying to say. So I thought that was a great section in your sermon.
Yeah, I want to just back on Jeremy, just in terms of, I truly enjoyed, appreciate the applications that he was making to us as leaders, and it was very pointed and I think powerful. And then also just want to add, I just like how you was also just aware of our culture time right now. Threw in phrases about COVID-19, you threw in stuff about the election, Biden, it's relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, you were extremely clear, easy to follow. I want to commend you on that. Felt like I always knew where you were, what point we were in. Yeah, so well done.
I thought your introduction was really interesting and engaging, and it supported your argument. And you did it both from the positive, a good king is good for the people, and right, like a bad king is bad. Like, so as goes one, so goes the other. So, and it was just like kind of really cool to listen to.
I really appreciated your treatment of verses 13 through 16, that you didn't just gloss over that, but you showed us the problem, but you were still able to connect to the gospel from it.
Yes, I think you exhibited some good obedient playfulness with the lame and the blind stuff. Right, so you told that part of the story particularly well, and then just highlighted like how hilarious it is, because it absolutely is in every way. So I was left like, because even when we read it, I was like, oh man, I forgot that. That's so funny. And then you made a point of like, yeah, like this is a taunt, yet David like turns it right back on him. So that was good.
Yeah, I really liked your intro, but I'll do a different one. You had a lot of good one-liners that kind of stuck with me too, especially in point 3, I think, around where Marge was talking, right? You were like, success is defined by God, we have no authority to define success. Just things like that. I think you've got a way of, you repeated them, which helped, but a way of turning a phrase that kind of really sticks in my mind too. So I think you're really good at that, and you had a lot of that in here, so it was helpful.
All right.
There we go.
Brothers
Well,
and sister.